Let me begin with a word of advice. If a professional academic expert in so-called urban planning or urban renewal or urban development comes knocking at your door, whether you're an ordinary citizen or a responsible public official, slam it in his face. Because whether he knows it or not, and whether you know it or not, the axiomatic principles behind his thinking and training are based upon a policy of genocide. That was the clear and explicit intent of the financier oligarchs who began the urban renewal game in the United States in the late 1950s. In the name of cleaning up urban blight and using public funds and governmental powers to promote low-income or affordable housing, they set out to destroy America's industrial centers. Their objective was to reduce the United States to a post-industrial society, freed from the carrying charges of sustaining a once productive workforce. According to this insane British utopian scheme, collapsing the tax base for funding public schools, hospitals, sanitation, and transportation would hasten the demise of what they fashionably termed the underclass. Demolishing or rehabbing the only affordable housing for such undesirables in favor of new opportunities for real estate speculation would ensure that the cities would be depopulated. Most of you will recognize that the intolerable conditions now prevailing in cities throughout the nation are very similar to what the originators of urban renewal intended 40 years ago. But to eradicate these conditions, you must eliminate the axioms which underlie the national disaster known as housing policy today. Then you can slam the door on the werewolf in sheepskin clothing. So who begat this murderous policy of urban renewal? The same oligarchical families of New England who opposed the American Revolution, who made their fortunes as opium traders for the British Empire, who supported treason against the United States during the War of 1812, and who played the British game against the Union in the Civil War. Their defective line also begat traitor Aaron Burr, the murderer of Alexander Hamilton, Prescott Bush, a supporter of Adolf Hitler, who begat Coke King George, and McGeorge Bundy, a Lowell, who first begat the genocidal Vietnam War, and then the SDS terrorists known as the Weathermen. These are not the sort of people with whom you should discuss better housing. Especially in Boston, where their rage against New England's crucial role in our War of Independence from Britain still has them foaming at the mouth. These latter-day redcoats were determined to make the destruction of Boston an example for the whole country. They don't wear British uniforms today, but once you know how to identify them, they can still be put to rout. Boston's Anglophile elite, using experts from Harvard and MIT, established a system of massive tax fraud to underwrite a high-rise speculative orgy in downtown Boston while crushing the city's vital services and productive infrastructure. The official apparatus included the Boston Model Cities Agency and the Boston Redevelopment Authority, backed by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, generally known as HUD, not the movie, and the Massachusetts Housing Finance Agency, the MHFA, generally known as EVIL. The semi-official apparatus included the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, the law firm of Hill and Barlow, and the Limits to Growth Planners of Massachusetts Tomorrow, Incorporated. Former Massachusetts Governor Dukakis, remember him? You'd be among the few people who do, appointed key figures from all of these agencies and institutions to leading posts in his administration on behalf of the same policy-making elite which stands today behind Governor William Weld. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, before Dukakis became governor in 1975, his cronies were at the center of a vast real estate swindle using federal, state, and city funds intended for low-income housing development. This same machine and the blue blood financial elite which controls it also established a system of fraudulently undervaluing their huge commercial real estate holdings, thereby cheating the city of hundreds of millions of dollars annually in needed revenues. Now, how did this happen? Under deliberate policies of disinvestment and deindustrialization following World War II, the resulting collapse of Boston's productive tax base left the city in a severe fiscal crisis by the late 1950s. The blue blood financial interests which had imposed the policies then moved in for the kill, offering the city the choice of either bankruptcy and government by receivership or submission to the vast looting schemes to be known as the New Boston. The second option anticipated using federal and state funds to underwrite a large portion of the operation. So on a summer day in 1959, over cocktails at the Harvard Club, the genocidal scheme known as urban renewal was set into motion. There were some very important gentlemen at that meeting at the Harvard Club. Ralph Lowell, chairman of the board of Boston Safe Deposit and Trust Company, and Charles Coolidge, who managed the legal affairs of Thomas Cabot, were among those who plotted to form a permanent financial dictatorship over the city of Boston. They also represented the same families who'd established the treasonous World Federalists in the United States not long before America's entry into World War II. The discussions begun at the Harvard Club in 1959 led to the creation of the Vault, designed to rule the city like a council of Venetian doges. The leading bankers, and thus the Vault, were included, of course, New England Merchants, State Street, Shawmut, First National Bank of Boston, now the Bank of Boston. And with a little help from their friends at the Boston Globe, the Vault wrecked the 1959 re-election campaign of Mayor John Powers and reinstalled their own man, John Collins. Now the perpetrators of the great urban renewal hoax were rolling at full steam.